Well, Hishjay Stongo. My name is Cherrah Giles. I am the Kachka in Phaswagi, so that's my tribal town is Broken Arrow. Phaswagi is Bird Clan. I am Muskogee Creek in Cherokee, originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, recently relocated to Naples, Florida. Currently, I serve in capacity as chairwoman of the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. So when this opportunity came up to do a WAS talk, there was a million things that went through my head and a million things that I could share, a million things that, everybody wants to leave that big, insightful quote that everybody will say. And I was like, I'm not in that place right at the moment to have that but I can share my story because that's how I got here. And remembering that my journey only began a little over 5 years ago in this movement and working in sexual assault and domestic violence and working as a survivor and walking into our tribal program and saying, here's my story and I don't know what I can do, but I know I need help and I want to know what I can do to help. And so serving in that capacity and in that role really opened me up, and that started my healing journey. So every time I give a speech or every time I'm in the work, and it's that healing moment. It's a healing moment every time. And sometimes my story is hard to say. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's maddening. Sometimes it's sickening. It's just different every time. I can't ever say I'm never over it. As much as I've forgiven, as much as I want to be in a better place, sometimes all those things come back. With that said, I'm also the mother of 4 children. So I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and my daughters are 24, 19. My boys are 17 and 16. So working in this movement and really trying to say, knowing what had happened to me at such a young age, knowing what I had witnessed growing up, how do I help my children not go through that? How do I help prevent this? I always said, when I grow up, I'm not going to let that happen to me. When I grow up, I'm going to have this amazing husband, and I'm going to treat my kids this way, and they're going to have everything. And sometimes that's not reality. And it's an unfortunate thing. But in that work, I found, did I do too much? What did I say? What did I not say? What was said to me or not said to me? And usually when I give the talk, I used to phrase my talk, how not to act. Because for so long, I acted in a certain way so that no one would know what had happened to me. At 8 years old, I had read a training. My mom had went to a training, and of course my mom was fantastic about, this is your body and you need to protect it, and back then it was the good touch, bad touch conversation, but and she was very realistic with me. Certain things will feel good and certain things won't feel good, and even when it's not appropriate. So I knew when I was sexually assaulted at 8 years old, I knew it wasn't right. I knew this wasn't supposed to have happened. But I didn't want to say. And even as much as safety as my mom created and my parents created, I couldn't say it. And she had just recently went to a training, and I remember reading her training book on how to, talk to children about these sorts of things. And she did all the right things, but then she would add, because if somebody ever hurt you, I would kill them. And I know that was just her way that's mom's way. And we know that. And as a mom, I know that. I would probably do that. I mean, your mind goes in a different place when your kids are hurt. But that's what kept me from saying anything. Because in my mind, I thought, she would kill this person, and she'd go to jail. And then my dad would probably help her, and so they'll both be in jail. Then I wouldn't have a mom and dad. And this was a relative, and so now that they are gone, my cousins wouldn't have a mom and dad. And so this is what I'm thinking at 8 years old. How am I going to protect everybody else? And so living with that for the next 10 years. Meanwhile, having my own child when I was 16, I still hadn't disclosed to my parents what had happened. And it's a weird, ironic thing, because my now ex-husband and perpetrator, at that time, he was the first person I had told what had happened to me when I was younger. And so I was like, oh, he's the keeper of my secret. He knows, and he's going to protect me. And, that went out one ear and out the other. And even though he kept my secret, it was like once our daughter was born, he knew he didn't want our daughter being around that relative. And that's how my secret really was disclosed. He was like, you need to tell your mom, you need to tell your dad, because this is why you can't go over there, or she can't go over there. And so that's that strange family dynamic. And it was weird how he wanted to protect our daughter, but eventually he would go on to, we were teenagers, went to high school with a black eye, did all those things to try to hide and prevent things. And I eventually married him thinking he's going to get better. Every time it's going to get better, right? Every time it's going to get better. And eventually you stop talking, you stop telling your family because they're kind of figuring it out, but you keep going back and they're trying to let you figure it out. I married him. We were married 7 years and had all 4 of our children. Unfortunately, he never got better. My breaking point was when he was so drunk, he came in, choked me, and the only thing that really saved me, my son woke up and he was like, kind of heard the commotion and yelling and turned the hall light on, and he was probably 4 or 5. He was like, little kid, Mom, what, Dad, what's going on? Or, whatever he said, but all I know is then my then husband had pretty much just passed out. And I remember thinking, I could be dead. He's so drunk, he doesn't even know. And now he's passed out, and all 4 of these kids are just here in the house. And even as crazy as that sounds, again, how not to act, I went on with life like nothing had happened. I was serving on our tribal council. I went to our tribal council meeting that morning, took my kids to my parents. And normally I'm very vocal. I sit in that council meeting like this because you could still see the fingerprint marks on my neck. Didn't say much in that council meeting, and I don't know, something finally gave with me. Had some really good girlfriends at this point, and they knew something was up. They didn't know my home life. They didn't know my private life like that. And so having one finally was like, "Are you okay?" And you're kind of quiet today. And I just broke down, and I showed her my neck. She could see the fingerprint marks, and immediately, they were just great. They all went into action, like, you're coming with us, we're going to get you help, and she happened to be married to an attorney, we're going to do all this. You think I left that day? I didn't leave that day. Continued on a few more months, and of course, because you're in the honeymoon phase again, everything's going to be better. So eventually, got it together, and for the safety of my kids, it came to that point. I never felt like my kids were in danger, but they were obviously very much a witness to these things, even when they weren't in the room, even when they weren't home. My daughter remembers things when she was 3 that I was like, wow, I had no idea that you knew or that you remember that. So it's a dynamic now that we have to work through as a family, like, how do you love your dad, and how do you forgive your dad, and how do I trust your dad with you when I'm not there anymore? So we're still working through that, but then for me, opening up to my community. This is my very public life. I served, again, tribal council member for over 10 years, but this is what happens at home, and nobody comes to my home. And if I went out, it was me and the kids. It was always just me and the kids, and people would always like, we know you're married, but where's your husband? And it was just that dynamic, and that's my stories. I know it's not unique. It happens. We hear the consistency all the time, but now it turned into, okay, how do I really protect my kids, and how do I really make sure they understand what healthy relationships look like? Because growing up, having witnessed domestic violence and having heard a police officer say, I can't do anything about that, as my parents are knockout, drag out, fight, and the police officer says, because they're married. Because we didn't have VAWA back in 1980. Because they're married, technically, my mom was seen as my father's property, and he can do what he wants to it. And even though I knew it was wrong, this was my normal. And I didn't dawn on me till my brother was like, Cherrah, the way we grew up, it wasn't normal. And I'm like, you're right. And now my kids are thinking, this is normal. I have to tell them this is not how it should be. So growing up, now fast forward, I have these kids that I'm trying to raise. My oldest daughter has Down syndrome. How do I teach a child with Down syndrome about her body? And so knowing my history, I'm very protective of her. She stays with family. She doesn't go too many places without us. And it was just one of those things that's always with me. But how do I verbalize to her that how do I protect her? And that's something we're still missing a lot in this work. We don't hear a lot about the protection of individuals with developmental and delays. And at the same mental health delay, those sorts of things. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done because I know their voices don't get heard. And if they're living in group homes or they don't have a constant guardian, what's happening, because they're easily perpetrated on, their easy prey, if you will. For my other daughter, she's 19. Unfortunately, she was raped. And in her mind, the same thing she knew growing up. So I'm trying to be cognizant of all these words and what not to say and how not to act. And just talking to other moms, another thing they had came up was, be sure to tell your kids too. Maybe the first person you tell may not believe you. And they may make it like it's your fault. But it's okay. You keep telling your story. So for my other daughter, same thing. First thing she told her friends. Her friends didn't believe her, like, oh, you're, typical teenage party, wrong place, wrong time. You're doing things you shouldn't have been doing. And you flirted with him, you liked him. That didn't really happen. It took a few years for her to finally disclose to me. And I share her story because with her permission to share that, because she's in a place now that, and, as female advocates, we're like really trying to empower our girls and empower our kids to be strong, go out and, protect others. So she can do that in a good way, but yet in her healing journey, finding her own place and how this tragedy has happened to her. And then with my boys, the same thing, raising them to be warriors, raising them to protect each other, to protect their sisters, to protect their families, to protect others around them, and to be able to call it out when they see it. And I'm so proud of them because they, Mom, today this happened. Mom, today this happened, because they know their sister who has Down syndrome. We tell them in our family, we fight 2 R words. There's that mascot name that they want to call us, and for the other name, even though it's a medical term for retardation, but it's often used in a hurtful way. So when my kids hear that, when kids are being kids and say, oh, that's the R word, my boys are great to stand up and say, you know what, my sister has Down syndrome and she's not dumb and stupid. She has Down syndrome. Medically, she's retarded, but she's not dumb and stupid, and neither is anyone else. So we're constantly trying to teach the kids those sorts of things and in our communities. So I just share that message because I think it's important. We share our stories because other things, like I said, from what my mom had said, from what I had heard another mom had said, it's like, oh, those are potential lessons that we can be teaching our kids in that next generation, because words are powerful. Words have a lot of power in healing and a lot of power in hurting and destroying. So being very cognizant of that. And then just moving forward and being that voice and looking for those that don't have that voice or not ready to step forward yet with their stories. But I look at that from that capacity that we haven't it's not talked about yet. We haven't seen it yet. But like my oldest daughter that has Down syndrome, how do we protect her in her situation that she's not very vocal? She gets her basic points across, but how would I know as a mom if something happened to her? I'm pretty convinced I would know. But how do I protect her and how do I teach her that? And then for other people, I do a lot of work with homeless individuals as well. We know the rates of sexual assault, of rape are astronomical because that's the way of living on the streets. It happens. But where are those women's justice? Where do they feel safe? And knowing if they're staying in a shelter, what are those policies? In an overnight homeless shelter, that there's men and women, but yet if they're perpetrators, being allowed to be in the same shelter with them. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done, and we know the high rates of homelessness in Indian country. So that area still needs to be addressed. But there's strength in all of us, there's strength in all we do, and that everyone has a place, again, in this movement and in this work. And then just bringing to attention those things where we still got a lot of work to do, and then how do we keep moving forward. So just wanted to share those few things with you guys, and appreciate you for being here, being willing to listen, being willing to learn, being willing to share your stories and how we can learn from each other from that. Because I always take away something. Anything I hear from anyone, I take something away. And so I'm glad we're having the WAS talks this year. Hopefully they'll continue and more people will share, because it's a great opportunity for attendees that may not be presenters to share their message as well. So, Mado, thank you.